Hey trekkers, Tom here. I'm going to tell you about our first backpacking trip to the Citrus Trail. Alright, so this backpacking trip took place in January 2019, so Saturday and Sunday, and this was our first backpacking trip that we've really done. That being said, this was also the second trip Arlo was able to attend with us, the first being the Everglades trip, and he pretty much just slept in the boat the entire way. But for this trip, Arlo, we did acquire packs and a harness for him for future trips, but him still being a little young at the time, we didn't want him carrying any load, so there are a few pictures of him wearing his gear around the house just to get him used to him having his harnesses. But we ended up just doing a regular harness and brought him on the trail and bared his load during the trek. So some of the gear that we used on this trip was nothing special that you'd see other backpackers use. A lot of it was my issued gear, my issued military gear. So it was just like mil-spec stuff, like a Molly 2, a rucksack, which is what I carried, and Nicolette had my military backpack. The weight of our gear was definitely a lot heavier than I think what normal backpackers use. My ruck was I think about 60 pounds. I definitely brought things that I didn't need. For me, carrying the heavier load was just more of a practice for the future runs. For when we carry heavier gear, it's just a lot easier and a lot more comfortable. So one of the things about this trip that I wanted to note was just how beautiful the weather was. Again, this is Citrus Trails in Withlacoochee State Forest, and Florida can get really hot. So we were doing this trip in January. The weather the first day was about 46 degrees, which was perfect. Got up to 72 around noon, and then that night it dropped down to 66. And then the next day, Sunday, our second day, was actually chilly. We were actually cold in the morning, but nice and cozy in our sleeping bags. The morning started out at 55 degrees, and then just started dropping all day, around 50 around noon, and I think it was in the 40s in the afternoon. But by that point, we were already on our way home. So this being our first kind of backpacking trip and Arlo's first kind of backpacking trip with us, we took a break about, I think, every 30 minutes, which was about 1 mile each time. Every mile we'd take a little break, sit down, rest. It was definitely great for me because my pack was heavy. Being 60 pounds, I wanted to get those off my shoulder. Overall, we can only go as fast as the slowest person, and Arlo being still young, he was probably the slower person, but he was so excited to keep pushing forward. All right, so when we arrived at camp, we split our tasks up. We built the tent together. I call it my Florida tent because it's a cheap Coleman tent. I think it was like 20 bucks. I bought it at a Walmart, and I use it in Florida because Florida is very sandy. All the soil and everything's got sand in it, and sand is very difficult to clean out and remove. And it can also cause a lot of friction and wear things down in fabric. So I use this tent in Florida because I don't want to damage my more expensive gear, like my nice light backpacking tents. But when we got to camp, we pretty much split our tasks. The first thing we did was we set up tent. The tent being bigger and just the two of us knocking it up, it was a lot quicker. And then I followed a very, I wouldn't say sketchy, but as a hard to read type map for getting water. There was about a mile away from our campsite, there was a well that we can get water from. So I decided to head out there, and Nicolette can hang in camp and watch Arlo and get a fire going. And sure enough, so I went out to the well, did my filtration system. I had a 2-liter water filtration system at the time. So that took a while because we had 3-liter water reservoirs. So I had to do 2 filtration systems just to fill up 1 bladder. When I got out to the site, found the well, pumped all the water, did all that stuff, and I came back and Nicolette had a good fire going. I did get a little lost at one point on the way back because I cut through the woods to get to the trail I didn't want to backpedal to the main trail and loop around and hit the trail up to the well, so I cut through the woods. And I tried doing it on the way back, but I got kind of, woods are difficult to have. There's no marker, so it's kind of hard to see where exactly you cut across. So I undershot and missed the campsite and had to loop around when I got to a trail. Should have just stuck to the trail. There's little lessons learned from this trip. Initially, we planned on doing longer treks. There were some different loops. I think we planned on doing Loop A into Loop B, and then the next day finishing up Loop B into Loop C. But Arlo still being young and not used to doing the longer treks, we ended up changing our routes and it was taking a little bit longer than we wanted to get to each checkpoint. So after the first or second checkpoint, we decided to just nix the other ones, just do a simple loop, which I think was loop B. And we ended up doing a break, like I mentioned, every 30 minutes. At one point, I think it was on the second day, we were close to finishing up our trip. Arlo just kind of quit. He just stopped and then lied down. So that forced us to do a break earlier than we expected. Another lesson we probably learned is we probably packed more than we needed, or didn't have the right type of gear. So again, I had 60 pounds in my ruck, and one of the things I brought was a beer canister. Definitely didn't need it. It was just me training, carrying a heavier weight. The beer canister had all of our food in it. And it could also double as a seat, which is why I brought it. I did bring a fold chair, a little tri-fold chair, kind of like a stool. And that was one thing to sit in. And we also had the beer canister. But when we got to the campsite, we didn't realize there was a fire ring there. So that was a nice surprise. And someone left some wood, either pre-chopped or found from the wood. So it was pretty much there ready for burning. We appreciate the folks that left that stuff. And if we had a hatchet or something, we probably could have cut some more fallen trees and left some more for future campers. Additionally, what we were surprised about when we got to the site is there were some benches there. So there were places to sit down, which was nice. So we didn't have to use our two separate ones. One of the things I wanted to mention about the Florida tent, it was definitely heavy, well over 5 pounds, probably close to 6. I don't know it offhand. I'll have to probably check the specs and maybe post it in this video what the actual weight is. But it's definitely not light, and it definitely takes up a lot of space. Very bulky, so that take up a lot of real estate. We also used my military gear for camping, so like an air mattress, and I think I had a yoga pad. The yoga pad was not comfortable at all. It was actually very worn because I've had it for almost 6 years. So it was kind of thin from just being rolled and used. Nicolette used my sleep system, and I think I used I call it my Florida sleeping bag. It's just a synthetic. It's meant for warmer weathers, and I think I slept on top of it for the majority of the trip just because I don't like to sleep hot. But at night it cooled down, so I just was able to tuck inside. And Arlo was snuggling with us, so he brought more heat. The second day after we left the campsite, there were some fun things we saw along the way. Again, we were going a different trail than we originally planned, so we cut across to finish the Loop B section. We apparently passed a ancient cemetery, or not ancient, but an old cemetery. We couldn't see it, but I think there used to be a village in that section, and it was on the map. It had a mark as a cemetery, but we must have missed it. And surprisingly, we also passed a cave. We didn't get to go in the cave. We kind of just like looked at it from the distance. We wanted to, not knowing how far this trail was, because we changed our plans. We didn't want to risk wasting time checking out the cave, so we just looked at it, took some photos, and continued on our way. Arlo being a little slower than what we expected, we didn't want to risk being there too long, so we just cut the trip shorter. Some interesting finds as well as on our way back, we saw some fallen pine cones, and these are some very large pine cones. We've never seen pine cones this big, and they're kind of a pleasant thing to find. Overall, this was a fun trip. It was a good learning experience of experiencing the weight and doing the trek and having an animal with you. You know, all these little things you got to take care of. In the end, this trip was a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do it again in the future. Hopefully Arlo can start carrying his own weight and his food and water, his little sleeping bag as well. But I definitely like to do this trip again, and highly recommend it to anyone that's in the area, and maybe explore the other trails. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the trails.